Been racing the clock the last couple days, actually last week, and I feel like I'm losing. But hopefully, I think I've got everything in order. And it's not on? Okay. Yeah, I gotta be careful. My chin starts hitting it. Yeah, I've been racing the clock this week, and I feel like I've been losing quite a bit. But one quick announcement. My Hearts and Hands team, we were going to meet Saturday, the 12th, at 5 p.m. here at the building for a fish fryer at the Fellowship Hall and Pavilion. Got a couple conflicts going on with that date. A lot of the team members are actually in the young adult group, and they have their meeting that date at the same time. So we're moving ours another week. It'll be August 19th at 5 p.m. that we'll meet at the Fellowship Hall. And it'll be a fish fry, and food will be provided and all that. We talked a little bit last week about demons, and we're going to shift gears a little bit and get away from demons and open it up to spirits entirely, all spirits. But when Adam and Eve sinned in the garden, death entered the world, and man has been dealing with it ever since. Some fear it, some challenge it, try to cheat it. Almost everyone finds it hard to accept, even though we know it's coming. Even though we're prepared for the person to die, it still leaves the survivors empty when it happens, when it occurs. We still wrestle with the idea of death. And there's a lot of questions surrounding it. There's personal ones, like when? When am I going to die? How? How am I going to die? I'm going to get hit by a car or a truck or heart attack, whatever. What happens after I'm dead? Do I just lie there unconscious for thousands of years? What goes on while I'm dead? Some questions about others. Almost invariably, whenever there's an accident, someone dies, what's the first question that gets asked? Well, where do you go? But yeah. Well, this is the first thing when they die in a horrific accident or something like that. Well, why did God did that? How about, did they feel pain? Yeah, that's one of the first things that he didn't feel any pain. He died instantly, right? Yeah, the press tries to ease our minds about that type of thing. So did he or she feel pain? Do they know what's going on in the world? Now that they're dead, do they know what's happened in life? Can I talk to them, or can they talk to me? The Bible has a lot to say about death as well. It's actually quite a bit to say. Just a few passages. James chapter 4:17 says our life is like a vapor, appears for a while and vanishes away. Hebrews 9:27 says, as is appointed unto man once to die, and after this the judgment. Then we also have, lost my notes. Okay. Ecclesiastes 9, verse 5. For the living know that they shall die, but the dead know not anything. Neither have they any more reward, for the memory of them is forgotten. And we could keep going on with these passages, but they seem to teach that you die and wait for judgment without any interest in what happens here on earth. But actually, when you look through the scriptures, you see from 1 Samuel chapter 28, Samuel came back from the grave, right? And appeared to Saul. You also look at, what's the next one I have? Luke 9, 28 through 31. Christ is on the Mount of Transfiguration. He transfigures himself. Who appears with him? Moses and Elijah. What were they talking about? Yeah, his death that was going to come, right? So they had a definite interest in what was going to happen in the future, okay, and things that were going on here on this earth. Matthew chapter 27, verses 52 through 53. Christ is dead. He's crucified. He's in the grave. He rises from the grave. Guess who also rises with him? Many of the saints. Yeah, and they appear to many in the surrounding community. Okay, in Jerusalem, that area. Yeah, at his resurrection when he rose from the grave. And so it happens. Okay. We have people that have died that are close to us. Sometimes we're ready for it. Most times, even though we might be ready for it, we're not. We're very desirous to have them tell us things. I remember when my kids were growing up, one of the frequent things that I asked myself internally was, I wish Dad was here. I'd ask him how to do this situation, how to handle this. Yeah, you know, desires, whether out of deep grief, curiosity, or what have you, we want to talk to those who've gone on before us. Well, guess what? You can make a lot of money in that business, or at least you could before a lot of laws got passed. So there's people out there offering their services, right? Mediums. I can get you in touch with your dead person, your dead friend, your loved one that's gone on, that's passed on. You also have people testifying about their near-death experiences, the light. I was on the operating table and I saw myself looking down on myself as I was being operated on, as I was dying. Yeah, and so forth. Observing things that happen. Excuse me. Today we're going to talk about spiritualism. It's not spiritual, but the act of conjuring up or communicating with spirits. It's a broad subject. There are several groups teaching and practicing different things, and we could go all over the place. All right. I plan to look at the development in modern times. Plan to look at some of the beliefs people have today, things like poltergeist, mediums, necromancy, and so forth. And then we'll look at the scriptures in more detail, talk about them. Eisenheim, from the movie The Illusionist, makes this statement. He's been called into question by the chief of police. He's under, chief of police is threatening with fraud for what he's doing. There's a mob that's gathered outside. He opens up the window and he makes this statement. I want you to know that everything you have seen in my theater is a fake, a trick. You can't talk to dead people. You can't bring loved ones back from the grave. What I've done has only been meant to entertain. Of course, the people did not believe him. My goal today is to look at this subject from a factual standpoint. Let the Bible guide our thoughts on the subject, and hopefully we'll see from there what the actual teaching is on spirits talking to us today. Well, development in modern times. We're not going to go quite so modern at first. Roman mythology, Greek mythology, okay? You have a river, right? What's the river's name? Styx, right? S-T-Y-X, yeah. What's the purpose of the river? What does it do? Pardon? Yeah, it separates living from the dead, right? There's a ferryman that takes you across the river, Charon, right? Charon, or however you want to say it, okay? How do you get across the river by the ferryman? What's required? Money. Come up here without my problem. I have a quarter. Money, coins, right? You have the money, you pay Charon, you're able to get on the ferry, go across into the Hadean world, okay? What happens if you don't have money? You don't go. Okay, so what do? You're dead, physically dead. You don't have money, you can't cross the river. Where are you?
La La Land.
Pardon?
In La La Land.
La La Land. Yeah. No, the actual teaching in the mythology is that you're roaming the earth, you're a spirit. Okay? until someone's able to pay the fare for you, right? And to get you across. Okay, that's the Roman mythology. Well, we won't leave the Catholic Church out of the group. We have the prayer for the dead, right? And that's to transport them from Hades to purgatory. But we also have this idea of sainthood, or canonization, right? What happens there? You're good, viewed as a righteous person, you're put before the group, you're voted into the saints, okay? What power does the saint have under the Catholic doctrine?
He prays for you.
He prays for you. He's able to help you. St. James, the patron, the greater, he's the patron saint of healing, right? Okay, so he's the one, you go to the hospitals, you see this guy, that's him, St. James, okay? He's the guy that supposedly is there communicating, helping people here on this earth, okay? So it's prevalent there. This goes back in time, we went back about 300 years before Christ, about 300 years after Christ with these analogies. But let's talk about the modern idea of spiritualism. It came from this guy, I guess the time gets marked with Emanuel Swedenborg, who's a professor at Uppsala University in Stockholm. He began studying the occults, okay? And in 1744, he saw a vision of a magus, I guess that's how you say it, revealing to him the secrets of eternity. Of course, the secrets that this guy revealed to him were obviously different than what the Bible says, okay? Then about 14 years later, during that time period, he claimed regular contacts with Virgil and also with Martin Luther and many other historical notable type figures. And then about 14 years later, in 1758, he published his book, Heaven and Hell. Okay, his writings on that. Spiritualism came into vogue in the U.S. in 1848. There were two sisters, maybe even three. But Katie and Margaret Fox, in particular, they heard knocks, they heard rappings, okay, sounds. And they believed, attributed those sounds as being communications that they were receiving from the spirit world. They actually gave a public demonstration of this in Rochester, New York, okay, 1849. And they invented the alphabet, okay? So many knocks means this letter. So many rappings means this letter, okay? 3 professors at the University of Buffalo saw it, observed it, commented on it. They were just popping their knees, okay? But the public dismissed it, believed them, okay? And they came about, that started the growth, if you will, of spiritualism in the U.S., okay? 4 years later, 1852, you have Mrs. Hayden, American medium. She introduced spiritualism in Great Britain. And then you have all sorts of organizations that sprang up. You have the British Association of Progressive Spiritualists, British Association of Spiritualists, the London Spiritualist Alliance, the Spiritualist National Federation, the Spiritualist National Union. You have the first National Congress of Spiritualists. It's held in Cleveland. And 2 years later, around 1854, had 10,000 professed American mediums offer their services to 3 million Americans here in the U.S. It grew. And I gave you some dates. 1848, 1849, 1852, 1854. Guess what happened 7 years later?
The war. Civil War.
The war. Civil War. Okay? Yeah, that's the next note. 1861 to 1865, you have the American Civil War. There's a lot of carnage and bloodshed that happens in the war. Just a brief Quick analogy, they use the Napoleon words, methods of battle. You actually find, they go back to Joab and Absalom from 2 Samuel chapter 2. Okay, they lined up on one side and they just hit each other, right? Go at each other. Difference in 2 Samuel, they had swords and strength. Civil War, they had bullets. Okay, a lot of death. Destroyed a lot of people. People that weren't ready to die. Loved ones who sent their guys off to battle that thought it'd be a quick war, it'd be over. The next thing you know, they get this message from the president, sorry to tell you, but your son or your daughter or your husband was killed in action. A lot of stories come out. You have the people that are battling with them, their comrades. You have stories about guys who had premonitions. They used to wear the red bandana, okay? Then the day that they died, they changed it to a black bandana, okay? They knew what was coming, you know. You have stories of people talking about, I was on the battlefield, I heard voices. You have people shortly after major battles occur, they go to the places and I don't know how to describe it other than I can't even say it. The devastation that they saw, okay, that they witnessed, the bodies and so forth, the death, the carnage, appealed to them emotionally. They developed these ideas, their spirit's still walking around in those battlefields, talking to them, telling them, okay? And then after that, after the war had ended, fallen comrades aiding in the battles, fallen loved ones sending messages to their loved ones back home, premonitions. Then you have lecturers that start after the war ended. People like Cora Scott. I'm not sure what her real name was. She's married several times. But Cora Hatch, I think, or B.L. Scott, whatever you want to look up her name. But she would go around lecturing about the stories that came from the Civil War. So Americans' minds, they've lost their loved ones. They've lost people in the war. And they're reaching out, prematurely lost these people. How do you get in touch with them? They're getting back to us. They're talking to us. That's the idea. You have other late 19th, 20th century guys. Daniel Home. He was a stage performer. His acts include materialization of ghosts. It's a weird way to say it, but actually bringing them to life, better way to say it. Spirit rappings, psychokinesis. He did a lot of entertainment for the Tsar of Russia. Helen Blavatsky, 1875, formed the Theosophical Society. Arthur Conan Doyle, we know him, right? Sherlock Holmes, yeah. Well, from 1917 to 1930, he was an avid promoter of spiritualism. There's a guy by the name of Arthur Ford. Houdini, at his death, gave his wife a message, a secret message. It was rather lengthy. She offered a $10,000 reward when he died if someone could tell her what that message was. Okay, Arthur Ford told her 2 words out of that message, so he received the reward. Okay, then later on, he dealt with a guy by the name of Pike, and I want to read, if I can find the book, page 117. Okay. Arthur Ford enjoyed revival fame in 1967 when the controversial Bishop James Pike of the Episcopal Church approached him about the possibility of bringing back the spirit of Pike's deceased son, who had committed suicide from an apparent overdose of drugs in February 1966. Bishop Pike greatly grieved over the circumstances of his son's death, but appealed to Arthur Ford for a seance with his deceased son. The televised seance, presented on television in Toronto in September 1967, claimed communications not only from Bishop Pike's son, but also from his former friends in the clergy. The incident was debunked by the press and various experts on the subject. However, a few devoted followers of Ford and spiritualism maintain that the seance produced a true communication with the spirit world. Ford was immediately deluged with requests for seances, including one from a movie chain to bring back Humphrey Bogart. Imagine all the movies. Arthur Ford died of a heart attack in 1971. Summary. Many early spiritualists were persons who had lost their faith in Christianity. They sought an outlook on life which went beyond the world of sciences, yet remained consistent with science. Spiritualism arose during a time of rapid change and disorganization in American society. These facts, mixed up with our preoccupation of death, our grief, made spiritualism attractive. I'd like to look at, time's flying by, I'm losing again. I'd like to look at some beliefs today about death.
I didn't understand who died and when and what.
Oh, Bishop Pike's son died in 1966. He had he committed suicide by a drug overdose, and so they televised the seance to bring him back.
I got that, but I thought you, at the end of your dissertation, I thought you said somebody died. You mentioned something about Humphrey Bogart, and then you said somebody died and whatever, and I didn't hear that.
Yeah. Arthur Ford died.
Oh, okay.
Arthur Ford died, yeah.
I missed that. I was curious.
He could talk to the dead, but he couldn't keep himself from dying. Just a quick jab at him, yes. I'd like to look at some beliefs today. You can basically take spiritualists and divide them into two categories. Those who maintain kind of some semblance of Christianity, Christian beliefs, and those who don't, okay? Those who do maintain some semblance of Christianity or affinity with Christian principles, they believe in the brotherhood of man, we're all one, continuous existence of the human soul. They also believe in individual human responsibility. They believe retribution in the life beyond for the deeds done on earth. They believe in the eternal progress of the human soul. They believe in the fatherhood of God and the communion of the spirits. Those which do not, they do not believe in any personal deity. They believe that the soul of man continues beyond death. They're totally naturalistic in their views. They emphasize the present life and continuation of the soul in a spirit world. In other words, it's just a spirit world that is like living here on earth. They believe spirits are human beings passed beyond death and residing in the spirit world. They have various spiritual planes of existence. As the spirit moves through the planes, they become more detached from the present world. And so therefore, only those who recently died can actually communicate back to us. I think I printed big enough. I printed off an article. Well, actually, I'm not sure what you call it. Maybe it's a creed. The National Spiritualist Association of Churches. Thought it's kind of interesting to read the introductory paragraph, and then we'll go into their 9 points. It says this web page is intended as a brief summary, a brief introduction to spiritualism. It will acquaint you with some of the beliefs and highlights of the National Spiritualist Association of Churches. No religion can completely be understood through a few pages, so please consider this as some of the basics. Spiritualism is a common sense of religion, one of knowing and living. We accept all truths and endeavor to prove their validity. Truths are found in nature, in other religions, in writings, in science, in philosophy, in divine law, and are received through spirit communication. Spiritualists believe that God, or infinite intelligence, is all. That is, expressing through all creation by love, light, and law. Humanity, the most complex of life on earth, reaches this divine source through prayer, meditation, listening to the inner awareness, and service. Why service? Because every living thing is a part of God. And so, as we serve life, we also serve the higher energies. Okay? So this group would probably fall into the first category. Okay? We think. Okay? There are 9 points. The philosophy of spiritualism. The following declaration of principles is published to the world, not as a creed binding to the conscience of the individual, but as the consensus of a very large majority of spiritualists on the fundamental teachings of spiritualism. We believe in infinite intelligence. We believe that the phenomena in nature, both physical and spiritual, are the expression of infinite intelligence. We affirm that a correct understanding of such an expression and living in accordance therewith constitute true religion. We affirm that the existence and personal identity of the individual continue after the change called death. We affirm that the communication with the so-called dead is a fact scientifically proven by the phenomena of spiritualism. We believe that the highest morality is contained in the Golden Rule, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. By the way, leading up to this, there's quotes from Confucius, Buddhism, Jainism, Zoroastrianism, can't even say it, and so forth. They all the way through, okay, that they talking about this principle, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. We affirm the moral responsibility of individuals, and that we make our own happiness or unhappiness as we obey or disobey nature's physical and spiritual laws. We affirm that the doorway to reformation is never closed against any human soul, here or hereafter. We affirm that the precepts of prophecy and healing are divine attributes proven through mediumship. Mediumship. M-E-D-I-U-A. I-U-M, not I-A-N. Medium. Talking to somebody. Okay. Let's talk about some terms in their meanings. Oh, this is almost dead. Okay. Poltergeist. It's a German word. Means noisy, mischievous spirit. Okay? You put something on one side of the room, it appears on the other side, poltergeist. Okay? Somebody here that's, they're having fun making trouble for you, right? They're believed to be energy forms from deceased persons. They're the ones that we say haunt the houses. Okay? There's a lot of different interpretations on it, but one of the most common ones that I find is that as we're living, the places we're living, we're giving off energy. So we're all here in this auditorium, we're giving off our energy. The building is absorbing the energy. We leave, we die, go on. Our energy stays in the building, okay? And that's the poltergeist, okay? Enough energy comes together and it does these things. Theories on what they really are. Psychologists believe it's a form of neurotic hysteria. Repressed feelings. I think the most plausible is that natural events may be badly observed and interpreted by persons susceptible to belief in spirit phenomena. Okay, let's talk about astral travel. Astral, physical body, low frequency, okay, moves slow. Spirit, high frequency, moves fast, goes around and around, okay? The idea is that, death only affects the low frequency vibration. So when you die, your physical body dies, okay? But the high frequency still goes on. We just can't see it, right? It's the etheric body. It's nourished by cosmic rays, causing it to emanate an aura, bluish or pinkish rim around the body. So if you're able to see it, we all look like pink people or blue people with their auras floating around us. Okay? That's the spiritual thing. The thing that keeps us, the spirit attached to us while we're alive, is the silver cord. Silver cord. I just lost my body. Yeah, it's right. Back here. The thing that keeps us attached is the silver cord. It holds the spiritual body in contact with the physical body. When the silver cord is broken, the spirit body leaves. Okay, that's the idea behind astral travel. I guess in those places where the body is able to go a little bit away and come back. In other words, when you're being operated on, you're up above the operating table and you look back on you and see yourself. It's elastic, so it pulls you back like a bungee cord. Mediums. They provide the communication link between living and dead. They're able mentally to communicate directly through deep trance, and they disassociate from this body to go into the spiritual world. So in other words, they get themselves into such a deep trance that they're able to leave their body, go into the spirit world, and communicate with the spirits. There's also the physical ideas that they communicate through materialization of human forms growing out of ectoplasm. They use levitation. They use levitation, playing of instruments, and also gusts of cold air, etc., indicate the spirits being around. There's other forms. There's the automatic writing. In other words, you have your hand on a pencil on a piece of paper, and it directs you how to write. The spirit does. And necromancy is the direct communication with the dead. Okay, we've got about 10 minutes. Let's give God the platform. Talk about the biblical teachings on the subject. First, the incidences that I referred to earlier, those who came back from the dead, were kind of taken out of context, okay? And that is done frequently with this subject. The spirits were not really roaming around on this earth. Samuel wasn't walking around waiting for this witch of Endor to bring him to talk to Saul, okay? Elijah and Moses weren't traveling the earth, and they brought the Mount Transfiguration for Christ to appear with them, okay? The dead saints arose, they didn't stay arisen, okay? God brought them forth for a specific purpose at that specific point in time, and that needs to be understood. Samuel came forth to deliver to Saul the prophecy that would be fulfilled the next day, that he would die, be killed on battle with his sons. Okay? That's the sole purpose of Samuel coming forth. Elijah and Moses, they appeared on the Mount Transfiguration with Christ for one purpose only, and that was the passing of the torch. Before it was Moses and the prophets. The commandments now had been given to Christ, and at his death, his law would be the law that would take precedence. And that was communicated to three guys, and from that three guys communicated to us through the Holy Writ. Okay, those three guys, Peter, James, and John, were present at Mount Transfiguration. Matthew chapter 27, verses 52 through 53. Remember, the Jews had this theory about Christ's resurrection? He didn't really rise from the dead, they said, right? They said somebody stole him. Well, guess what? You have all these people rising with him, proving this big event took place. The centurion that was there reached a different conclusion than what the Jews had. Okay? Christ had risen from the dead. He was alive. And these appearances were to give proof that Christ had power over death. Had truly overcome death and risen from the grave. Let's turn to Ecclesiastes chapter 9.
Brother Warren?
Yes, sir.
If they had stole the body, they would have brought it in front of him and said, no, here he is.
Oh, yeah. Well, people don't work that way. They don't want to prove, they can't prove their points. They just like to speculate about it. Ecclesiastes 9, verses 1 through 10. Lifted out verse 5 earlier, but we'll read this whole passage. For all this I considered in my heart, even to declare all this, that the righteous and the wise and the works are in the hand of God. No man knoweth either love or hatred by all that is before them. All things come alike to all. There is one event to the righteous and to the wicked, to the good and to the clean, and to the unclean, to him that sacrificeth and to him that sacrificeth not. As is the good, so is the sinner, and he that sweareth as he that feareth an oath. There is an evil among all things that are done under the sun, that there is one event unto all. Yea, also the heart of the sons of men is full of evil, and madness is in their heart while they live. And after that, they go to the dead. The one event, death, happens to all. For to him that is joined to all the living, there is hope. For a living dog is better than a dead lion. For the living know that they shall die, but the dead know not anything. Neither have they any more a reward, for the memory of them is forgotten. Also their love and their hatred and their envy is now perished. Neither have they any more of portion forever in anything that is done under the sun. Go thy way. Eat thy bread with joy. Drink thy wine with a merry heart. For God now accepteth thy works. Let thy garments be always white, and let thy head lack no ointment. Live joyfully with the wife whom thou lovest all the days of thy life, of thy vanity, which he hath given thee under the sun, all the days of thy vanity. For that is thy portion in this life, and in thy labor which thou takest under the sun. Whatsoever thy hand findeth to do, do it with thy might. For there is no work, nor device, nor knowledge, nor wisdom in the grave, whither thou goest. I broke this passage, there's several points in this passage, but I broke it down into three just for our, based on our subject. But all men die. As long as one is alive, he has hope. But at death, his destiny is sealed. Okay? Verse 10 is very important. There is no work, no device, no knowledge, no wisdom in the grave, whither thou goest. It ends. Job 14, verses 19 through 21, talks about the water wear the stones. Thou washest away the things that grow out of the dust of the earth. Thou destroyest the hope of man. Thou prevailest ever against him, and he passeth. Thou changest his countenance, and sendest him away. His sons come to honor, and he knoweth it not. They are brought low, but he perceiveth it not of them. We have the story of the rich man and Lazarus from Luke chapter 16. I was going to read it, but we'll just briefly talk about it. You may recall the story. You have the rich man, he's blessed in his life. You have Lazarus, who's a beggar who's at his gates, right? Lazarus dies. He's carried to Abraham's bosom. The rich man dies, and he lifts up his eyes in torment, and he sees Abraham and Lazarus. Sees Lazarus in Abraham's bosom. And he asks for Abraham to send Lazarus to dip his finger in water and give him touch his tongue so that he could have some relief. We know that there is a separation that takes place in death. It's a period of torment, a place of torment, and a place that's of comfort, Abraham's bosom. There's also a gulf fixed that does not allow passage from one to the other in the story. The rich man saw Abraham and Lazarus. There's no mention what Lazarus saw, by the way. Okay. The rich man at the end remembered what his brothers were like on earth. But did he really know their state? Don't think you can get that from that passage. Where are the dead? 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, verses 13 through 14 describes that they're asleep. John chapter 5, verses 28 through 29, they're in the graves. Revelation chapter 20, verse 13, those that died in the sea, they're in the sea. The sea will give up its dead. Those that are in the grave will come from the grave, death and Hades. God communicates to us through his word, not spirits of loved ones. Hebrews chapter 1, verse 2 says that in the last days he has communicated with us through his Son, Jesus Christ. John chapter 1, verse 17 tells us that the law came by Moses, but grace and truth come by Jesus Christ. On 3 separate occasions, God spoke from heaven while Christ was on earth. At his baptism in Matthew chapter 3, verse 17, this is my beloved Son, in whom I'm well pleased. On the Mount of Transfiguration in Matthew chapter 17, verse 5, he adds the phrase, hear ye him, to that statement. And then in John chapter 12, verse 28, when the Greeks came to visit Christ, it says, I have glorified it, and I will glorify it again. 1 Timothy chapter 2, verse 5 says, there's one man and one mediator between God and men. It says it's the man, Jesus Christ. I've got to read 1 Corinthians 15, 33 through 50. We're out of time, but you can read that on your own. John, in 1 John chapter 3, verse 2 says, it does not appear what we shall be, but when he appears, we shall be like him. Let's bring it to a quick conclusion. Okay? Men have strong desires to talk to their ancestors who've gone on to their reward. I mentioned about my dad and others that I've had close affiliation who've passed on. I would love to pick up the phone and call them and find out some things from them. Some knowledge that they had here on this earth that would help me in my life now. The reality is that the dead are in sleep, waiting for the final judgment when their sins will be implemented. The cases of the dead talking with the living were few and specifically directed by God for specific purposes here on earth. The key element is where we stand in relation to God. And I'll leave you with the words of Revelation chapter 22, verses 12 through 15. And behold, I come quickly. My reward is with me to give every man according to as his work shall be. I am Alpha and Omega, the beginning and the end, the first and the last. Blessed are they that do his commandments, that they may have right to the tree of life, and may enter through the gates into the city. For without are dogs, and sorcerers, and whoremongers, and murderers, and idolaters, and whosoever loveth and maketh a lie. Rather than try to talk to dead ones, read God's word, follow it, so we end up where we should end up, in heaven with Christ throughout eternity. Thank you very much. Lord willing, next week we'll talk about the cults.